I found myself even working with clients who were fine with it, open with it, just forgetting to record sessions that I thought, oh my gosh, if other people could hear this conversation right now,
Yeah.
life changing.
I
So,
actually had that with the client I'm coaching right now. He asked me to record it next time because he couldn't actually believe what he said himself, and he said I would love to hear myself say that again. Actually, so
yes, and isn't that like the magic of coaching too? When you find yourself in a deep conversation, something comes from the client, and both of us can be like, what, whether it's a belief or something that they hold dear or a dream that they didn't know they had.
Yeah, or something that just clicked for them, that they finally see the thought patterns that they usually apply, and then when they speak it out loud, it's like, oh, wait a minute. But yeah, let's continue with the values then. So
Right.
what were your thoughts about it?
Yes, values. So I see values in two major categories. I see core, you could call them core values, or I like to call them sentimental values.
Yes.
And these would be those one word, kind of like, sometimes they seem like buzzwords, right? Like truth and love and justice and courage. And so I see these as sentimental values, to where they inform, how we feel about life and what is emotionally, energetically important to us about life. And so we tend to see those conditions and circumstances play out because of our involvement, but because we're looking through a lens of, okay, so does this align with my core value of truth? I'm not going to surround myself with liars, people who deceive me, if my core value is truth. I want to be told the truth, and I'm going to tell the truth.
Yes.
And so that's an example of what I would call a sentimental value, which is it's not really it's not easily quantifiable, it's not easily measurable, but it's equally as important as the other type of value, as I see it. So there's sentimental values, and then I look at behavioral values. So our behavior almost always occurs in patterns, which is influenced by our sentimental core values, and yet can be mutually exclusive of our sentimental values.
Yeah, but they still do have to be in line with each other, right?
That would be ideal. We call that integration, alignment, integrity, right? We definitely want to be in that space, but I don't think everybody is. I think, in my experience, I've spoken to people where, passion is really important to them. Being passionate about their work, being passionate about their creative capacity, being passionate toward in their relationships. So they'll have passion as like a sentimental value, and then they're in a job that they hate, doing things they don't enjoy for people they don't respect, and they neglect their creative time, and they're disenchanted in their relationships. So very easily we can find ourselves out of alignment or out of integrity. And so I think it's important to look at our inner values, to look inward and say, okay, so what do I truly believe is important about life from my perspective? And I think it's equally important to look at the outside world and even our own behavior and our actions towards that and say, am I operating in a way that is consistent with those values? And if so, how does that occur for me in my world?
Yeah. Actually, I see it as more like one and the same. And the idea that I have with values applies to the sentimental and the behavioral at the same time, right? So if your behavioral values are different than your core values, then, like you said, it's not really in alignment. So then you will definitely start hurting yourself because of that, in my opinion. So I think you shouldn't separate the two because they're so interlinked with each other. What I personally think about values is more like values to move towards. So that would be honesty, love, compassion, maybe adventure for some people. It can be many different things, of course. But if your value, your core value, for example, is yeah, adventure. Let's take adventure. If your core value is adventure and your behavioral value is safety, then that completely goes against each other, right? So
Right.
I don't think it makes a lot of sense to separate it from each other.
Mhm. So that's interesting you say that, and I find that well, I think the reason why I look at them separately is because for what you just described is I've encountered so many situations, including my own, where I would hold something as being valuable. This is a place, this is a sentimental idea, a concept, an abstract, a value that I hold dear, and I'm finding myself not operating that way in the world. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I love being vulnerable. So, vulnerability creates a space where we can trust one another because you know that, like, I'm not giving you some sort of facade. And trust is essential in all relationships. But I think the most powerful relationships are the ones that cultivate deep trust, to where, you know, I can receive from you the truth I need to hear, not necessarily what I want to hear. And so vulnerability is key for me in coaching and life and relationships in general.
Yeah.
And so something that I have caught myself doing, or maybe not doing, is a reluctance to be seen, a reluctance to be heard, not putting myself out there. So vulnerability is just as much, you know, what happens in our quiet conversations, telling the truth, as it is out there in the world, you know, showing you where I'm wounded, you know, being imperfect and presenting that to the world so they can go, oh, wow, like, you know, Ian's a person, and you know, maybe we have more in common than we have different. And
Yeah.
so over the last year, you know, I
So
admit,
let me get back to what you
yeah,
just said.
yeah.
As I see it, then the core value is more a value that you keep for yourself, and the other values, the behavioral values, is more geared towards other people for you. Because what you
Look at
said
it that
was
way.
the core value was honesty. So you want to, or what did you say? You said honesty and
Vulnerability.
vulnerability. So you can be vulnerable with your close group. That would be the core value then. But to be vulnerable in a behavioral way, that would mean more like, okay, I would be vulnerable whoever I talk to.
Mhm.
That's more how you see it, if I understand it correctly.
Yes. I think that's an accurate way to put it. And I would add on the behavioral side, like what I would do, for example, with a client is take a really clear look at how they invest their time and where they invest their time and what they find themselves doing. And then, like, let's say we'll make a little wheel of how they spend their time. And let's say a huge chunk of that is work or their career, their profession. So I would say, okay, so what do you do? And they would, and then share what they do. And I'd say, okay, so what does a typical day look like for you? And so we unpack that. And then I try to look for, okay, so this value of creativity, how does that occur for you in your work? Does it occur for you in your work? And if so, how? And oftentimes I'll find that they totally embody that. Like, oh my gosh, I find every opportunity in my job, even though it's not a traditionally creative profession, I find ways to get creative about it, with it, and I love it. I said, well, that's great. And sometimes they'll say something like, well, I really value transparency. Like, I like to know where people stand. I like to put it all out there. And then, so we'll start to talk about their relationships and they're hiding things from their spouse. You know what I mean? So it's just, we all have an area where at any time we might waver from integrity, we might waver from what's ideal. But I think that's why it's so powerful to have, like you said, a value to move toward, like a place to live from, something to hold up. Like, this is what we aspire for. We aspire for love. We aspire for honesty.
Yeah.
And then to reflect that as best we can in our lives, in a way that we behave in a way that's in accordance with that value.
Yeah. So for now, I want to keep together the behavioral and the core values because they align so well. And though there might be differences, in my opinion, they would be small if you compare it to. So in my eyes, you have the, like you said, the moving towards values and then moving away from values. And for me, of course, honesty, love, compassion, for me, those values are pretty high on the list. And then on the other side, the moving away from values, I have like regret or loneliness, sadness. Those are values too, in my opinion, to some degree, of course. So what I want to suggest is that we focus on those two, the values to move towards and the values to move away from, because in my eye, it gives a more clear picture of what's expected, right? You have a clear set of values. Okay, this is what I don't want, and this is what we do want.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Do want, don't want, toward, away from. Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay.
You're right. It clarifies the expectation.
So let's split them up. Let's first do the moving away from.
Isn't it funny how it's easy to start with, oftentimes, even I'll bet you find this too with clients, sometimes it's easier to talk about what they don't want because that list seems to be longer for some people. And then you can flip to the polar opposite and say, okay, so what do you do want because of that?
Yeah, and I think it's also more positive because you end it with something positive.
Yeah.
And I think that feeling that kind of lingers for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
I experience this very often when I do something that is a negative experience. I tend to need some time to switch that around again. And also with positive, it takes some time before I don't feel as positive anymore. So
I agree.
Away from. So I think 10 will be enough to have a good list. So
sounds good.
For me, moving away from value would be regret. Regret is my number one thing that I want to move away from, because in my eyes, regret is just really scary because it means that you had the opportunity at some point, but the opportunity is not there anymore, and now you regret not taking the action. And regret can only happen when it's already too late, in my opinion. So
that's a good point.
That's for me the number one from to move away from.
Wow.
And I think it's also applicable for the group, of course, that we're working in. That we have to make clear that, okay, people, you have to take action right now. Here is the opportunity. We're giving you this opportunity. And if you don't take action on that, you might regret that in the future. So I think it will help people understand that they have to take action sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Wow. So do you want to flip that? Do we want to go stepwise and flip them one by
Oh,
one?
the opposite value, right? Then the moving towards value.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm fine with that.
So what would be the polar opposite of regret?
I think, in my mind, the first thing that comes to mind is courage.
Courage. Courage to take action in spite of the fear, because isn't it so true that with the opportunity comes an obstacle all the time, right? When we can't have the treasure without the dragon, you know,
Yes.
and so courage, I agree, would be what we would need to bust through that, whether it's procrastination, whether it's hesitation, whether it's fear of rejection, fear of criticism, whatever the fear is, courage is going to be necessary to break through that regret and to
Yes.
eliminate the regret.
Do you maybe have another suggestion that you say, okay, maybe we can apply this too to yeah, to have the polar opposite of regret?
You know what? Because I love that you said courage, and my mind took me to if regret is kind of coming from like a fear of loss, like a fear of lost opportunity, something like that. I almost want to say either gratitude or accomplishment, achievement, maybe. Because I think one kind of brings about the other. Maybe gratitude would be more substantial, because I think if regret is sort of that energy of I missed out, you know, I had that opportunity and I didn't capitalize. Gratitude would sort of turn that around to be like, okay, but what can I really appreciate about my life or about that day or about that time that can help to, you know, heal that wound a little bit and realize that it's not all bad.
Yeah, but that's more when you already feel regret, actually,
Mm,
in
fair
my eyes.
enough. What about initiative?
Initiative.
Yeah.
Um,
Initiative to me is that energy of I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna take responsibility, and I'm gonna do it imperfect. I'm gonna do it scared
yeah,
and create some order.
I think that's a pretty good one too. Yes,
Initiative.
yes. Let's put that one down too.
And of course, we're gonna need courage to take initiative. Like it's a must.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with that. Um, so let's flip it around right now. That you do the second one to move away from, so that we have the back and forth a little bit more.
Definitely. Move away from. Hmm. Move away from. I want to say manipulation.
Can you explain that? Why
Yes.
you want? I
Yes.
totally agree, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. So I found myself, due to some events in my life, I was talking with one of my coaches, one of my mentors yesterday morning, and he was telling, you know, he was having me share some of my story, because we noticed some patterns that hadn't fully run their course, I hadn't released. And so one of them is something I've been working very diligently on over the past 6 or 8 months, which is shifting from this I'm gonna grab life and make it yield to me what I want, to move away from that forceful, manipulative, demanding and taking from life what I want, as opposed to, which, like, sometimes, at least I'll speak for Americans, like we kind of like celebrate that. We think that's like sexy, or wow, look at this guy, taking over the world, grabbing life by the horns. But it's really not that for me. I found that to be, it created more ugliness in my life than it did beauty. And so I've been working very diligently over the past 6 months or so to move from an energy of manipulation to inspiration, to I'm going to be a vessel. I'm going to allow the spirit in, allow energy in, allow God in, and then pour that out with no expectation in return, in the sincere desire for somebody to be inspired so much that they take action to improve the quality of their life, regardless of whether that has anything to do with me. And so, yeah, I found myself in this situation where, and we all have our stuff, but I found myself in a situation where I was being abused. And I told myself, and I affirmed to myself that I'm never going to allow this to happen again. So I put myself into martial arts to protect myself physically and to protect others. And I conditioned myself mentally and spiritually to come from this place of, I will never be in that situation again. But unconsciously, what happened was I developed a pattern of, I'm going to manipulate life to look the way I want it. And then so it was this perpetual feeling of, I'm not safe. For me to win, you need to lose. The competitive mindset.
Yeah.
Versus the finite game versus the infinite game. We had that conversation before. So manipulation is something that, whether consciously or not, I absolutely will not tolerate in my life, and I don't want to be around people who operate that way.
Yeah, I completely understand, and it made me think about the book of it's the first book, I think, from Simon Sinek. Start with Why, and while I was reading through that, something jumped out at me, because manipulation is actually all around us. Almost every company is trying to manipulate you in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And it's so integrated actually in our society that it's hard to really not be manipulative at all. So if you're 100% completely forthcoming and not manipulative, while you're not doing that, other people are doing that, and because of that, they are producing the results, while you, with your honesty and your straightforwardness, don't get the results because the manipulation works so well.
In the short term, as you
in the short term, of course, in the short term, but I completely agree that we need to move away from manipulation. Mm-hmm. But to what degree do you allow that to happen still? Because if you try to convince someone, you're already in this mindset of trying to manipulating them to think about something in a different way. And I think it's really, really hard for the collective, at least, to completely shut it out.
Right. So I would see it as, there's probably many types of manipulation. Like immediately I think of a chiropractor doing manipulation, doing spinal manipulation. So that's very helpful.
In a technical job, you're manipulating the environment. So we need to better define manipulation. So what kind of manipulation do we want to move away from?
Wow. So I would say my intuition tells me the manipulation of people to satisfy wants and needs of the organization, the individual, the
Yeah. So if we split it up, it's on the one side I think this is a good explanation from it. Self-serving manipulation. That's what you want to move away from. And if you are coming from a place of serving other people, and you have to manipulate them in some way to take action, that would actually be the good form of manipulation. So the moving away from would be self-serving.
Mm-hmm. And then you could kind of be like, we could break it down like this too. Another perspective is maybe inspiration of people, manipulation of things and situations, right? So we can inspire a person to take action and also manipulate the situation to be in favor of them actually following through with that action.
Yeah. So if we had to put a name on that form of manipulation, what should we call that? Serving manipulation or?
I mean, I want to hear your perspective. I kind of see it as we want to move away from manipulating people and move to, I guess the opposite would be inspiring them. But, not but, manipulating things is okay. Manipulating situations, it may be necessary to bring about a more favorable outcome.
I feel in this regard we're extremely in the gray area, right? That it's pretty hard to define the line of, okay, when are you manipulating in a destructive way versus a regenerative and positive way? Because what you said about manipulating the environment, we can take that to an extreme too, like we are doing with getting the oil from the ground all over the planet, of course. And to some degree, that is a productive manipulation to transfer it into something useful for us.
Right.
But on the other side, you can also, when you overdo that, destroy some natural processes in the process. So,
you know what? Let's come back to, I think you surmised it well. You brought it together well when you said self-serving manipulation, right? Because that means we're putting our wants and needs before the person in front of us.
yes.
And then what ends up happening is we'll operate, whether consciously or not, in a way where we make sure our wants and needs are met. And that might even be taking away something from the person in front of us. So let's go with self-serving manipulation. I like that.
Okay, awesome. So, well, I think you already said it for the moving towards, that would be inspiration, a value to not only be inspired, but also to inspire.
Wow. And you know what? It reminds me of something. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday about the difference between having something, doing something so that we can be something, versus being something so that we can do something, and in the end we have something. So like what you just said about not only being inspired, but inspiring others. We would have to be inspired to inspire somebody else. I can't show up, if I showed up on this call like, hey Dennis, yeah, I didn't sleep too well last night, and I don't know, I'm just here, man. Like, I'm not gonna inspire anybody.
Of course not.
Right. I love that.
Okay. Awesome. So for then let's jump back to moving away from value.
Mm-hmm.
In my eyes, well, we already touched on two of the most important ones, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the next one to move away from? Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is hate, because yeah, that's obvious, of course. Hate only produces negative outcomes. So that I don't think we even need to get into this too much. That's
Right.
pretty clear. And
Pretty
then on the
clear.
other side, love, of course.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I'm interesting. I'm interesting.
You're
Yes, I'm
interesting.
certainly
Yes, you're pretty
right?
interesting.
I am interested in your perspective on hate. So maybe from your perspective and your own life experience, what has brought about a state of hatred for you?
Well, the situation from my past, that I was bullied a lot. And the funny thing actually is that I didn't hate the other people that were bullying me, but I started to hate myself. So,
Wow.
from my perspective, hate is something that you don't only hurt other people with, but also yourself at the same time. Because a hateful state, in my mind, would be to let me think for a second um, to blame something that's outside of you or even inside of you. I think you can't really separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can to some degree, but okay, I think that I got it. So when you feel hateful, you will act hateful towards others. So the hateful feeling, that is purely something within yourself. And usually people say, okay, I hate this person because they did this or that to me or to
Right.
someone else. And you are feeling that hate. So that will change your behavior towards a person or situation. And if you hate that, you completely dismiss everything that you hate or the person that you hate as being something bad. But as you probably know, there is good and bad in everything. So
Yes.
when you start hating, the focus completely shifts to the negative thing, and that is why we want to move away from that.
Yeah.
That's my idea about this.
Yeah, that resonates very well with me. And I found myself hating. I mean, it's in alignment with that same situation I was pointing to from before, where I found myself being abused and wanting to manipulate life and make sure that that would never happen again. But also, that I'm gonna stand over life. I'm going to put things down here and put me up here, which is never a good idea. We want to be in balance. But hate is something that I experienced for my abuser, right? I hated him for it. And so what happened was my behavior would be lashing out in pain and then hurting myself and him in the process. It's like a two-edged sword. It's like that burning energy of anger, of hate is like poison. And like you said, it skews the perception. We start to focus on the negative and we act in a way that's negative towards others as well as ourselves. And then we also bring about those conditions and circumstances, right?
Yeah, but in my opinion, hate doesn't necessarily have to completely be negative. And let me explain that for a second, because it sounds counterintuitive, of course. But for me, for example, is what I'm seeing all around the world happening with everyone constantly competing, and really almost everyone being focused on money. That's something that I actually hate to see in the world. But because of that, I want to take that away to some degree. But it's not in a hateful state, but I still hate the situation. So,
I
yeah,
see.
you need to separate the two
Yeah,
in some way also.
I agree. I agree, man. And I resonate with that. Like seeing you know injustice out there in the world, seeing something that's not right out there in the world. We can look at that situation and say, I can't stand that. I won't stand for that. I won't allow that. I'm going to do my best to bring about a different outcome. And so we can come from a place of love, even though we might out there be in conflict with something.
Yeah, so it's more the thoughts about the situation, that's the hate part, and then you want to feel, as an emotion, you want to feel a loving energy to bring about something better than that. So
Mm-hmm.
you can hate the situation itself, but you don't want to channel that hate through yourself. That's, I
Right
think,
on.
a really beautiful way of putting that.
Right on. And you know what? I'm going to challenge us here because I think it would be really easy to say, oh, okay, so love, got it. Let's move on, right?
Yes.
But I mean, what does that really mean? I mean, what does it really mean to love, to be coming from this place of love, to be love, to do loving things, and to have love in our lives? I mean, I was thinking this morning about this, actually, this very same idea. I was like, um, I was actually checking myself. I was thinking, you know, do I really operate from a place of love predominantly, with something like what was top of mind was my intimate relationship with my girlfriend. I was
Yes.
thinking, do I really come from a place of love predominantly? And I think that she would probably say yes. But for me, I always had this standard where I want to close that gap from the man I could be to the man I am right now. And so I want to make sure that I am advancing in the direction of, like you said, a moving toward value. How can I embody more of love and come from that place and be that man more in my life? What is your perspective on what does it mean to have love as a moving toward a core value?
For me, what love means is actually to accept fully. I think that's the shortest explanation that I can give,
Wow.
because accepting a situation completely, that automatically puts you in a state of love. At least it works like that for me.
Yeah.
And it's a state of non-resistance to the outside world.
Yes.
That's actually for me what love means: to accept completely, and also to see the beauty in everything. Also the challenges and the hardships and the negative things. You want to see the beauty in that, and understand that that's just part of life, and realize there is something better after this. Because if you're in a painful place, there's only, well, in essence, you can go both ways, of course. But if you're in a low place, it's easier to rise up again, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. So How do you see it?
I'm very much in agreement with everything you just said. It's when I think of love, like true love, coming from this place of unconditional acceptance, unconditional reverence and resonance for something, someone, even a situation, and maybe even especially ourselves. To love ourselves. I was actually I'm part of a Bible study. I mentioned that earlier. And unfortunately, many people in that Bible study are in a perpetual state of resistance within themselves for their perceived wrongdoing, their sin, as we call it in the Christian community. And I do my best to explain to them that the only thing that heals those wounds, the only thing that will stop that pattern of self-sabotage, of unproductive behavior, of immoral behavior, is not fighting it and resisting it and beating yourself up for it and hating yourself and others for it, right? It's this love. Accept yourself, accept what happened, harvest the good and forget about it, forgive the rest and move on. Because if not, we're going to live in that pattern of whatever we resist persists, right? And so we want to be in that place of, if resistance is a closing and a hardening, acceptance is an opening and allowing. We want to allow that love in for ourselves so we can pour it out for others.
Yes, completely agree with that. So no extra words we need to spend on that, I think.
Right. So ladies, I mean, pay attention to Dennis right now. Coming from this place of love, because he's a loving guy.
Thank you for those words, man.
Absolutely.
So now it's your turn again, I think. The fourth one to move away from.
Move away from. I'm going to say pride. Pride.
And why is that?
I have had some firsthand experience of pride being a very in excess. I don't think there's anything, there's pride with a capital P, we'll say, where I think pride is such a sinister, dangerous emotion or state of being, because in my experience, and I'll speak just for myself, I have found pride to be something that I struggled with throughout most of my life, in the sense that I became prideful to the point of arrogance with having, pulled myself up by my bootstraps. The cliche goes, I crawled out of my own hole in life. And, and a lot of that was just sheer determination and white knuckling persistence of determined effort of, again, coming from an unhealthy place, coming from a place of not believing that I was enough, not loving myself. Life taught me not to love myself. And then so I grew to unconsciously hate myself. And then I made it my mission to, by sheer effort, to crawl out of this place, out of this hole, except I never got out. And so what happened was, pride for me is this energy of, too much confidence to the point of arrogance, putting all of the ownness and responsibility on myself. How do I articulate? How do I find the words? So they say pride before the fall, right? When I have built myself up in life has always humbled me again. And that happened, enough times where finally I got the message, finally I learned the lesson of humility, where pride is not attractive. It's really not. I think that there's this facade that at some point in our lives, we all put on this mask of, look at me, I'm so amazing. Look at what I did. Look at what I achieved. And there's nothing wrong with sharing our accomplishments. When it gets to the point of like, yeah, I can do anything, right? It's like, it starts to get repulsive, starts to become unattractive. It starts to become a facade, a superiority complex masking inferiority on the inside. And so pride for me has been very dangerous in the sense that unconsciously it led me away from God. It led me into this place of, I am the solution, I am the answer, I've got the answers for you, I did it for myself, I can help somebody else do it. And I found that to be very polarizing and disenchanting in my relationships, in my business efforts, in my life. And so actually a lot of the past few months has been a lesson in humility. It's one long lesson of humility, which is pretty cool.
I think this is kind of the same with manipulation, that it's kind of in the gray area, right? On one side you have pride, and on one side you have the humility. But to have the right balance between those two, that's what I think will be important in that regard, because to some degree you have to feel proud about what you did to be able to keep doing that, because if you don't feel proud about what you did, you regret it doing that. And yeah, I think you still need the certain level of pride in what you do, and I think it can be healthy too.
Yeah. So I would call that esteem.
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 How do you mean?
Esteem. So the feeling of satisfaction or accomplishment or being pleased, and I'll use scripture because it's something I'm familiar with. God allegedly created the world and then saw that it was good and acknowledged that, right? Said, and so rested on the seventh day. Yeah. So I think I would agree with you that a total lack of any kind of feeling of accomplishment, of esteem, of recognizing the good, of appreciating what we've done, what we've accomplished, who we are. A total lack of that is not healthy either. It's like a continuum. It's like a sliding scale.
Yes. So in my mind, what I think, instead of pride, what we should focus on then is, as moving away from value, would be then arrogance, and then like on the other side you have the moving towards value would be I think confidence then, right?
Yes, you thought it, or you said it, I was thinking it, confidence. I agree. I like that. Very cool.
Okay. So next one to move away from is, in my eyes, let me think. If you come up with something, you can say it too.
Gotcha.
Worry. I think worry is a really good value to move away from too. And then on the other side would be trust, in my opinion.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, because worry, that's just completely pointless, in my opinion, like we talked about just a few moments ago. that hangs together with resistance, right? Worrying what's going to happen and then resisting those negative outcomes, and that produces actually the outcome that you don't want.
Yes.
So yeah, it's absolutely also completely pointless, of course, to worry, because 99% of everything that we do won't happen in the end. And you can think of all the things that something might go wrong, but it doesn't make any sense for me, at least, to think about that, because of what I just said. The 99% doesn't happen, and then just focus, what can we do? Let's trust that at least we are doing something, and along the way we'll find out how our ideas need some adaptation along the way. And that is exactly what I'm doing with my coaching business also.
Beautiful.
Just having the trust that everything will fall into place eventually. It
And
doesn't have to happen tomorrow or next week or even a month from now. I'm just gonna trust that I will get some input from the left side or the right side or from wherever it comes. I will trust that people will point out to me, okay, this is something that you're not completely right about, so let me help you set you a little bit more straight, and then you can adapt that into your process. Trust that that will produce good results, and if that doesn't work, you can go back to, okay, where did this not completely align with, for example, my values, or where can I improve upon? It's already working to some degree, but it still needs some refining before it's perfect.
Love
And
that.
the,
I love that.
the
You mind if I
worry,
share something on that real quick?
yeah, of course.
So something that one of my coaches taught me is a way of it's a very simple formula of self-evaluation and reflection, but also a way that we can both give ourselves feedback and ask for feedback from others without it becoming critical or demeaning, whether to ourselves unconsciously or from another, and allowing someone to make us feel bad about ourselves. So I call it the well indifferent model of feedback. So like, I don't believe in constructive criticism. I don't think that is a thing that we can do. We can't criticize somebody and say, well, you did this wrong and this is bad and do this instead, because it never feels good. It never feels constructive. I don't know about you. I've never experienced constructive criticism in the traditional sense. It's well-meaning, it's well-intentioned, but the result isn't great. So I employ the well indifferent model. I say, okay, so what did I do well? What intention did I deliver on? What decision did I follow through with? What action or result or outcome came about that I'm pleased with? What did I do well? And then what could I do differently next time so that I can bring about a better outcome and possibly remove some opportunity for failures and shortcomings, something like that.
Yeah, but that's exactly constructive criticism in my eyes. You point out something that's already going well, and then you say, okay, I do realize this can be way better, so let's try to implement this or that. But it can also point at a weak point of you that can also be constructive. Okay, this is what I noticed, what you're doing, and in my eyes, that produces a negative outcome. So I feel that constructive criticism is criticism without directly attacking the other person. Okay, you're an asshole because you're doing this wrong. That's not constructive. In my eyes, what you just explained by what are you doing well and what can you do better, that's constructive criticism.
Yeah, just a reframe, I guess, maybe for someone watching this or listening to this.
I think that's exactly it. It's a reframe of the meaning that we give to criticism or constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So worry and trust. Yeah, worrying, of course, being in resistance to what could happen, and thus we actually end up producing those outcomes eventually if we stay in that state of worry and anxiety. Trust, meaning that we are allowing, we're accepting, we are open, we are moving forward, feeling safe, and welcoming that feedback, welcoming the lessons and life that we're going to learn, welcoming the successes along with the failures to learn from and develop ourselves through. So I love that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to explain to you a little bit more about what I feel trust also does for you. And
Please.
that is actually to release your attachment to the outcome. So yeah, what you have when you worry, that's usually about the process towards the outcome that you're working towards.
Wow.
And you worry about the problems that you might face along the way. But in a trustful state of mind, you will come up with more creative ideas, in my opinion, because you know that the idea that you come up with doesn't have to be perfect, and you trust that you will find the answers along the way. So that it frees yourself up to be more creative, in my opinion.
I would agree.
Awesome.
Definitely. So I think we could continue, and I also think that we have a pretty solid list right now. What are your thoughts?
I was actually thinking a little bit in the same way. So I don't know how much time you still have today, but I also really think we should focus on the boundaries then for the group.
Definitely. If you don't mind taking a pause, I have some more time if you want to get into boundaries.